Hello and welcome to Early Intellect's Empowered Parent Series. My name is Claire Thomas. I am an educator, an advocate for early learning and early childhood education, and I am also the founder of Early Intellect, your partner in nurturing early literacy at home. I'm so excited to be bringing you this series where I'm going to be talking with parents and families and diving deep into their experiences in navigating the school system, their interactions with school leaders and educators, and also just the state of education right now and how they envision their role in their child's education. I'm so excited. I have my good friend joining me today. I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her children.
Hi, Claire. Hi,
Nice to
everyone. Hey. So my name is Dr. Sylvie Saintus, and I'm currently a licensed social worker, therapist, and a coach. And I am the founder of Elevate Coaching and Counseling Services, which essentially is a nonprofit organization. And we're committed to helping people elevate their lives by providing them with the tools and support they need to thrive. So our mission is to empower people to achieve their full potential by offering personalized coaching and counseling that essentially promotes personal and business growth, emotional well-being, and spiritual development. And I am a proud mama of four beautiful children. So my firstborn is Malachi. He's about to be 10 years old in like 2 weeks. And he's in fourth grade. Milan, she is 8 years old and she's in third grade. Michaela is 6 years old. You know, so many of them I be forgetting sometimes. But she's 6 years old and she's in first grade. And the little one, she's three, about to be 13. And she's currently in pre-K 3.
Oh my goodness. Time really flies because I remember when they were just little tiny babies and
Yep.
now you have an almost 10-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, time
Don't
flies.
remind me. Don't remind me. It still makes me feel some type of way.
So with four babies, four children, how would you describe your relationship just with the school system in general and also with your kids' current school and their current teachers or past teachers?
Um, I will say this. It's a lot. It is. Like it's four of them, right? And it's, one of me and one of dad, right? So splitting that time between work and doing all the things, running the business and still being present, at their schools, talking to their teachers and things like that. I'm not gonna lie, it could be better. And I
Mm,
can do a better job. And right now, because like my son has the IEP, right? So a lot of the focus goes on that. And my 3-year-old Mia, this is her first time in the educational system, right? In the public educational system. So a lot of the focus goes on that too. My 8-year-old, she's pretty self-sufficient when it comes to like learning and things like that. She actually loves it more now. Um, so not to say that she doesn't get a lot of attention because she still does, but she's a little bit more self-sufficient. So, and the 6-year-old, she's in the phase of learning to love as well. And you know, unfortunately, school wise, the quality wise could be a little better. So we have to focus on her giving her supplemental things. So it's like a lot, right? And all four of them have different personalities and learning styles. So learning that and trying to give them all what they need and, talking to the teachers, having their phone numbers and emails and advocating is a lot. I do give myself grace because having to like divide my time between the four of them and everything else can get taxing. It really does. But trying,
yeah, I'm
definitely
sure it's not
trying.
easy. You have such a wide range.
Right,
It's definitely not easy, but the most important thing is that, like you said, you're engaged, you're present, and you're doing the best that you can, and you
right.
recognize when you need to supplement, and you've been doing
Hmm.
that for Michaela.
Yeah,
So that's good.
yeah.
Um,
I'm trying.
what do you think has been the most rewarding part of you being an engaged parent? So being engaged, keeping up with your children's education, keeping up with their school, what has been the most rewarding part of that?
Honestly, I think the most rewarding part for me, especially in this season, is being able to be more present, right? Not just present at home, but being present at school. So I love this community, right? Because I live in South Jersey. It's like a smaller, suburban community. I really love it. Because it's smaller, like it's easier to get to know people. It's easier to see some of the educators in the community while you're at ShopRite or whatever, right? So it makes it like even more engaging. Um, the other thing I really like, and that's rewarding for me, is being able to like go to the school when they have like their Dr. Seuss reading weeks, right? And being able to go read a book to the class. So last school year, so I didn't tell my daughter that I was going, Michaela. So she was in kindergarten at the time. So I just like walked in the door to go read them the book, and she turned around, I was like, oh, and she was so excited. That to me is everything. And like for some, it's like, oh, it's just reading a book, but it's the fact that her mom came to the school and showed up, and she was able to like show everybody her mommy, and mommy's reading all of us a book. Like that was everything for her, right? So for me, I'm like, I may not be able to do all the things, but those little things are very rewarding and they count for me, right? Like when my son had a mommy Sundance, and I was able to go and participate. And it's like, oh, my mommy's here, and we're like having fun and dancing together, right? So like just being able to engage in that way, like their book fairs, like I haven't been able to volunteer yet, but that's like one of my goals. Let me go volunteer at the book fair so they can see my face, get to know some of the educators and like the administration even more, right? By being present. So like that has been very, very rewarding.
I love that. And it's so important. Like I remember when I was in the classroom and we would have those volunteer weeks where parents could come read, families would come read, and the parents would come or grandparents, and the kids would be so excited and be
Yeah.
talking about it all day for the rest of the day, especially when it's a surprise. So I love that you've been able to do that and that she's been able to just enjoy that and have you be present in that way.
Yeah.
So we talked about the rewarding parts. Have you faced any obstacles or has anything come up within their schooling that you're just like, oh, I wish this wasn't happening?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I really love my town, right? It's really, really nice neighborhood. My issue is the quality of education could be better. Like even if you like go to niche.com and see the ratings, it's like sad to say, but like rated like 1, 2 out of 10, right?
Wow.
So it's not the greatest. I will say that I encounter really great teachers, like really, really, really great educators, even really great like administrative staff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the school system as a whole could be way better, and I know that they're trying different things now to make it better. Like I think they've gotten some grants and things like that, like to have computer club and robotics and like different things like that that they just started in the last couple of years. So I'm really excited about that aspect. But as a whole, the quality could be better. Because when I used to go do school visits with some of my youth client who are clients and go to their schools, especially like the charter schools. I'm like, wow, you're in kindergarten learning all of this, and I don't remember half of that. Like I don't even remember, right? And then coming here and seeing like Michaela and looking at her like things that she's doing in first grade, I'm like, this is like what Mia should be doing in pre-K3, pre-K4. Like you get what I'm saying? So like that to me, like they're a little behind. Um, but then that's where we have to step up more as parents, right? And give
Yes.
more like supplemental things.
Mm. I feel like so many people that I've spoken to have shared those same sentiments where they're feeling like just the quality of their child's education is lacking. And myself too, I felt like when I was within the school system, so many of the curriculum, there's so many gaps that were missing. There's so many things that I had to supplement as a teacher and also
Yeah.
had to help support my parents supplement. And it's just so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate that this is the case where, you're sending your child to school and you're expecting them to get a full, well-rounded education, and it's just not happening. And sometimes it's not the teacher's fault because they're
Right.
just given the curriculum,
Mm-hmm.
or given materials that are just like not adequate enough. And so it's up to them to supplement. But again, if you're supplementing as a teacher, sometimes it's on your own dime, it's on your own
Yeah.
time. It is not always feasible for everyone to do. And so, like you said, that's why it's so important for parents and families to be involved, to know what's going on, to stay up to date with whatever the curriculum is that their
Yeah.
child is learning so that they know what they need to supplement and when they need to do so. So it doesn't end up in a situation where their child is not falling behind and they have to catch up.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Can you share a specific instance where maybe you felt supported by the school system and something that was happening with your children?
Yeah. So, I will say with Malachi, this last school year, like I said, he has an IEP, so he's in the special education system. Um, Last school year, his teacher was she told me and dad, she was like, listen, he don't belong in my class. I
Mhm,
understand he has an IEP or whatever, but he can go to like a general ed class with support, and there are things like an inclusion type of class.
mhm,
Um, and she was like, he does not, and she was like, dead set like he does not belong in here. She said, I have to give him supplemental work myself. He's always finished within like, a few minutes of all the work that he gets. And he gets bored, so she has to give him like more work. So she was like, she believes in him and that he can do well in general ed. So I was like, I'm here for it because I was gonna ask about that anyways. Because he always comes, so I'm like, yeah, I'm done with homework. Like, everything's so easy. And we want to really challenge him. So I really, really appreciated that she, saw him and was
mhm.
just like, oh, we're not just gonna leave him here, because we want to keep him here, but that he can like leave and do better, right? And that he'll be up for the challenge and do well under more pressure.
It's nice that like she recognized that and brought it up to you because, sometimes that's not the case. Children
Absolutely.
slip through the cracks, and so I'm glad that that was like a good turnout.
Yeah, yeah. It turned out really, really well.
So you mentioned that you've had to supplement for both your children, it seems, because it seems that Malachi is getting work that is not challenging him enough, and Michaela, she's needed just additional support. What are some of the strategies or some of the tools that you use to support your kids as somebody who is working full time, who's very busy, and who has four different children to think about?
Well, shameless plug. I went on Amazon and got some of your workbooks back there. Yeah. So honestly, just getting more workbooks that will, help them aside from the work that they get from school. And I also use what's education.com. Education.com has like a lot of different resources on there, like even some like quizzes and stuff, assessments to see where they are. So I've definitely used that, especially during the pandemic. That was a hot mess. It was a mess. Yeah. So education.com definitely has been a major resource. Going on Amazon, getting some workbooks and things like that have been good. And there was like another, I think I got it on Amazon. They're like, you know what? They're here somewhere. They're like thick math workbooks for each
Mm-hmm.
grade.
Oh,
So I would get a grade higher and challenge. So I mean, I wouldn't tell them, but I would get a grade higher and have them do it. And you know why I did that actually? There was a time I didn't let them know what grade it was because there was a time I gave them the workbook a grade higher, and they automatically was like, "Oh, I can't do this. It's a grade higher." And I'm like, "Yeah, you can." So I was like, you know what? I'll give you guys another one or whatever. And it was still a grade higher, but I just kind of like bubbled it out so they didn't know. And they were out there just teach
Just
them
do
one. Their
it.
dad's, their dad does math stuff, so their dad taught them one time. There they
Mm.
went. They started doing it again. So just doing stuff like that to challenge them a little bit. Um, but yeah, Amazon, your workbooks, education.com for sure has been major resources.
What do you think is your biggest challenge with like having to do all the supplemental work? Like, do you find it hard to find time to do it? Do your kids like give you any trouble when you're trying to work with them? Are you facing any challenges when doing the supplement?
Yes, girl, there are but so many hours in the day.
Mm,
When do you do all the things? And like they also have like programs that they're in. Like my son now is in basketball, the girls
yeah.
are doing dance, like there's all these different things, right? So there's like but so much time in a day or even a weekend nowadays to really do them. But that's like the major challenge. As far as them, I think at first they were just like, no, I'm not here for it because they just want to play, right? But I mean, at this point, they already know what it is. Like don't even put up a fight. Just do what you have to do so you could go do what you want to do. So sometimes it is a challenge because they just don't feel like it. For them, it's like I've been in school all day. I came home, did my homework, and I'm getting extra homework. So it almost feels like
Yeah.
punishment. But at this point, they know what it is. So.
So I feel like from conversations I've had with different parents, different family members,
Mhm.
a lot of what you said holds true for so many people where just like finding the time to work with their kids and also the kids feeling like they're being punished for simply having to do extra work. And one of the ways that like I'll tell them to combat this is number one, for the timing, you don't need a lot of time. So many people think that they need 30 minutes, an hour, and it's really not true. You don't need that. When I was in the classroom, I was having small group instruction with my students where I was really targeting the skills they needed. That was 20 minutes, sometimes even less. There was a time when I had like multiple groups and I was doing 12-minute groups with just that focus skill and focus work. And I was seeing the students 3 times a week and they were learning, they were getting those skills. And so you need 10 to 20 minutes. You don't need 2 hours. You don't need an entire hour. As long as you know what you're going to be working on, you know the skills that they need, that's all the time you need. And the second way to combat that is to also make it engaging, make whatever you're doing fun, make it engaging, make it like a game. Once you tell kids, oh, we're about to play a game, they're on board. They don't even know what it is yet. They're on board. And so sometimes the worksheet might not be the best idea, or even turning the worksheets into a game. One of the things that my students always loved, if I throw a timer up and say we're racing or we're trying to beat the time, now everyone wants to do it. Everyone wants to be the fastest. And so there are so many different ways where you can make whatever you're working on with your child more engaging, getting them to buy into it so that it doesn't become like this thing of where they're feeling like they're being punished for working on these different skills or doing work after they've already been in school all day.
I'm actually really glad you said that because I think one thing for me is like, oh my God, the kids are so behind. The kids are so behind. Oh, I got to do all the things. So, like, it really does make you feel like, let me spend this whole hour, like, and do whatever. But, like, what you said is true. Just even if it's a few minutes, doing it with them, like, it really is still helpful because they
Mhm.
retain it more. The kids, their attention span is not like the greatest, right? It's not the longest. And then the second thing is, I think that as a parent, this is why it's so important to know your child or your children, right? Because my kids can be very competitive. So
Mm.
when I do want them to be engaging and things like that, I definitely turn it into a game. Um, and not a competition, oh, you're smarter than this person or whatever, but I do turn it into a game because they do get competitive and they love to play. And the other thing too with the kids to make like education more fun is using everything to educate the kids, right? So even when we're playing a game of Uno, and we're putting cards down, I'll stop and be like, well, look at these three cards. Who can count the fastest to tell me how the sum of these three? So just doing stuff like that. So I like that you said that because I think the challenge of time and feeling like we have to like do all the things and like have so much of it. It really isn't the case. So I really do love that you said that. 10,
Yeah.
15 minutes a day really does add up.
It does. And everything could be a learning opportunity. Your car ride could be a learning opportunity. Your
Yeah.
walk, bath time. There's so many different places where you wouldn't think to stop and insert a learning activity, but you really can, especially when we're talking about literacy, we're talking about like phonological awareness. There's so many activities where they don't need to be touching anything or seeing anything, and you're just orally telling them these activities, and they could be
Yeah.
done anywhere, basically anytime. And so there's a lot of space for parents who are interested and who want to support their child to be able to do so.
Yeah. And I think that's part of intentional parenting,
Mhm.
really being intentional about the time that we do have and making it as quality as possible, and not just it's beyond just being present like we're here, but really
Yeah.
being present and utilizing all the time we have as opportunities to teach. Because growing up, I didn't have that, right? I think a lot of people in my generation as millennials, most of us probably didn't have parents to sit down and do homework with us and to really like teach instead of just giving us rules, right? So now, like as a millennial parent, it's kind of like, okay, now we have to be a little bit more intentional, right? And that becomes challenging too, because it's not just about giving you food, giving you shelter, and giving you clothes, but really teaching you life skills. And like you said, a car ride, a walk in the park, all of it can just be that bath time. All of it can be opportunities to really teach the kids. So I'm here for it. Love it.
So we talked about kind of like your win within the education system where Malachi's teacher was pushing him for more. Do you have any situations or any instances where you faced challenges or just interactions that were not super positive from either um, school leaders, other educators, or just other people who interact with your children?
Yeah, so the pandemic was pretty tough, right? So I'll start with Milan. So at that time during the pandemic, Milan had to have been 6 years old. So at the time, I think she was like in pre-K four. I don't think she was, yeah, I think she was in pre-K four. So the issue I had with that, once they transitioned to virtual learning, then I was actually able to see interaction a little bit between like the teacher and the class and things like that. Her teacher was great, her teacher actually challenged them and gave them like pre-K four worthy work, you
Mm,
know. But what I noticed was that at the time, Milan wasn't really into like, wanting to go to class, and she just wasn't into it. She loved learning, but she just wasn't into it. And this was even before the pandemic hit. So once they got virtual learning and I was able to kind of observe and see, one thing I noticed was that she would like be eager to raise her hands to answer questions, but like seldomly got called on.
mm,
And I would notice that, she'll put her hand down and kind of get discouraged. And this was happening a lot. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to email her teacher and let her know, like, hey, I'm not saying you got to pick on her all the time, but I've been observing for a week straight and she barely ever got called on, right? There was like
yeah,
two kids in particular that kept getting called on. Fine, but like let's engage her as well. So once I emailed the teacher and let her know that, and we had like a little conversation about that, then Milan was getting called on more and she was a little bit more engaging, especially with virtual learning. And then that summer, I want to say it was that summer or the following summer, they had like some program like a reading program in the summer. And I was like, let me sign her up and go. And she was not too thrilled about that because
mm,
she wants to be home for the summer. But like within a few days of going to the reading program, she was coming home like super excited. She wanted to go. She was getting ready to get dressed for school. And I'm like, it's a different Milan here. Like, what's up, Mimi? What's going on? And then last year, I ended up meeting the teacher that she had during the summer program, which ended up being Malachi's special ed teacher last year. So when we went to some conference and the kids came And Mimi saw the teacher, ran up to her and hugged her. And the teacher was like, "Oh, I remember you. You're so smart. You're so this." I was like, okay, she's affirming. Okay, so
Mhm.
she sees her. And then she was telling me like how, she did in a reading program. She was telling me some of the weaknesses that she had and her strengths and how she was able to work with her on it. And I was like, so you were able to see her. She felt seen and you look like her. So that's a plus. You get what I'm saying? So I'm like, so I like that. So being able to just advocate for her to be seen is a really big thing, right? Because sometimes the kids, it's not that they don't like school, but some of them feel like they're not seen or being ignored, or you know what I'm saying? Sometimes there may be some behaviors, and it's like you got to see deeper than just the behavior. There might be some underlying things. So just kind of advocating for your kids so that they're so the educators can actually see them. And I get it because it's a lot. I visited classrooms. I get it. It's a lot, especially when it's like one to a lot, that you educators have to like manage
Yeah.
all these personalities and these kids. So I get it's a lot. And I guess that's why it's important for us to be there to kind of, advocate and maybe challenge the status quo a little bit. The second challenge I had with Malachi actually coincides with what I was telling you earlier with his teacher um, advocating for him to be out of that classroom.
Mhm.
So when we had our IEP meeting, she mentioned it. And the rest of the staff was like, well. So I was just listening. I was like, let me just listen, because they may think I'm one of those moms, but I'm not. I'm not
Mhm.
the mom. Okay, let me just hear what they're saying. So his teachers going back and forth with the staff. And I was like, these are your peers, but let me listen to see what's going on. So she's advocating for him, like, he doesn't need to be in here. He should go to general ed, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, no, the IEP says this and that. And I'm like, well, first of all, that IEP is from last year. Give me an updated one. And secondly, let him try. So they were literally like challenging me. And I had to like, I don't like pulling out cards, but I had to pull out a few cards and like, I know what I'm talking about. This
Mhm.
is my son. I see what's going on here, and we're gonna have to like address this. Give
Mhm.
him a chance to go into an inclusion classroom, see how he does, but we're not gonna hold him back, especially when the teacher's doing extra work to give him supplemental work because this is too easy for
Mhm.
him. So it was like literally an hour of going back and forth. And in the end, they did transition him to another school. And he's doing great there. He's doing amazing there. So whew, that was a lot. And even like when we first got him assessed for special education, even that was a challenge, right? Because he started off in a school and he was doing very well with the teacher. And that was his first time in the public education, right? So he was doing very well with the teacher. And then when we got him assessed, he ended up getting the IEP. And they were like, well, we're going to have to move him from this school and class to another school. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, this school doesn't have the supportive services that he would need. And I'm like, well, get one because he's really doing well. I know
Yeah.
my child, he's not going to do well with this type of transition, right? So after Christmas break, we transitioned him anyways because it was like a back and forth. And then what happened? 2 months later, pandemic. And that just wasn't the best. It just
Yeah.
wasn't the greatest. So that was definitely a challenge.
Man, I'm so glad you brought up like the IEP process and getting evaluated and all of that. And it is just like it's the most frustrating experience. I know
Yeah.
from parents, it was always the most frustrating for me as a teacher
Hmm.
because why is it so hard to get kids the support that they need? Why is it so hard to get them the services that they need? And it's
Right.
like you have to fight and fight and fight for the kids. You have to. And
Hmm.
it's just like I also love that you brought up like advocacy because advocacy in all aspects, right? You brought up how you had to fight for Mimi to just to be seen. And
Yeah.
sometimes when people think about like advocating for their kids, they're just thinking about when something is going wrong or when like a situation like an IEP or getting evaluated. But it could be as simple as her needing to be seen, her needing to be affirmed, needing to
Yeah.
be affirmed by her teacher. And teachers are human. Sometimes things just slip up. There's slip ups. Things happen, big classes, and sometimes we
Mhm.
need the reminder from the parents. We need the reminder from the caregivers, like you need to be doing more, or you need to be doing this, or try this instead of what you've been trying because it's not working. And I
Mhm.
think that educators and just other people who work with children in general need to be receptive when parents and families are coming in and advocating for their kids. Back to the IEP, I just feel like last year was my worst year with like the IEP process and just evaluations in general, to the point where it was one day I was in actual tears because one of my students that I was fighting for 2 years, his family came ready the first day of kindergarten, knowing what he needed, knowing everything that was going on with him. And for 2 years straight, we fought, and finally towards the end of the school year where he was in first grade. And I transitioned with my class to first grade. So towards the end of the school year, we finally sat down for an evaluation meeting after 2 years of fighting. And in the meeting, we're basically being told that he does not need services. He was not going to be receiving services. And it was bad. It was so bad. And it was just like I was like, no. I'm showing you this. I've been with this child for 2 years. His parents are telling you this. Every other adult who works in the building is telling you this. This child needs additional support. And they ended up the child study team ended up changing up what they said and allowed him to get evaluated and get the support that he needs. And now he's actually getting the help that he needs, and he's doing so well. But that was one. I had four different cases,
Oh my
and
God.
only one of them turned out well. And it like
Oh,
actually brought me to tears because of just how hard it is for the kids to get the support and the help that they need, especially when they're in like kindergarten and first grade, which is when they need to be receiving the support because as they get older, it gets harder um,
yeah.
to get them on track. It gets harder to have them catch up, but
Oh
it's rough out.
my God.
But
That's
I'm
why
glad
advocacy is
I
so
advocated.
important. Yeah.
Yes, so important. And I'm glad that like there's parents like you who are advocating and every parent that I talk to who is going through this process, I tell them the same thing. Show up, keep notes, keep a log of all the conversations, just everything, so that when you are in those meetings, you're ready and don't back down unless you're getting the result that you feel is going to be in the best interest of your child.
Yeah, for sure. You got to know your child too in order to
Mhm.
advocate. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's so important to like stay informed of what they're doing, keep track of their learning, their progress, all of that. All right, now that my rant about IUPs and getting evaluated is over, are there any other issues in the educational system that you feel deserve more attention, deserve for us to talk about just a little bit more?
Um, I would say from what I've noticed, especially like during and after COVID, there's like this big issue with ELA. I don't know if you've noticed that, like as an educator, but the kids I was working with, I thought math would have been like the biggest issue, but a lot of them, and I'm talking about ranging from like 5 years old to high school, was struggling with like language arts. I don't know why. I don't know what it was. But I'm like, this is something that definitely needs to be addressed, especially because during COVID, I think that's what it is. When I interviewed a lot of the kids, especially during COVID, one of the issues that they had with ELA was that essentially they were teaching themselves, right? So they got a lot of the work. It was like, hey, read this, do that. And they had to do it by themselves, right? So during like for a whole year or so, like kids were teaching themselves English stuff. And I remember being in school and not really being, and I remember being taught. I didn't have to like teach myself, right? They broke down like language arts, the skills, how to read and things like that. And for a whole year, like kids had to teach themselves. Who knows how well they did, but a lot of them passed and went through,
Yeah.
right? Had to go to of the following grade, maybe even a year behind, right? So now like we have like 3, 4 years later, we're behind. So ELA has been a really big thing. And and that's a very necessary skill that as humans we need, right? It's like the language arts skills, reading, writing, things like that. So that should be addressed a little bit more. I know like you're an educator, so I don't know if you've seen that on your ends or like what your experience has been, especially since COVID.
I have absolutely seen that, and just the great debate that's been going on over the last couple of years with balanced literacy versus structured literacy, and more people talking about the science of reading, where, we have all this research that tells us about how children learn to read, what actually happens in the brain. But the issue is so many of the curriculum being used in schools does not reflect what the research says. And so we now have all of these kids who have been taught how to read the wrong way. They haven't received enough support, enough direct instruction. And they're still being moved on, especially after COVID, where it's like no child is staying back and they're being moved on to the next grade and the next grade. And then we have eighth graders who don't know how to read. We have kids going into high school not knowing how to read. And all of it is starting from kindergarten, from first grade. And it's actually like one of the reasons why I ended up starting early intellect in the first place,
Right.
because so much of what we know kids need to learn how to read was missing in the curriculum, is missing in what is being taught in schools. And so when you know better, you do better. And so as I was learning about all these different things, I was supplementing what was given to me within the district. I was supplementing the curriculum. My entire phonics curriculum, my entire phonics block was supplemented by other things besides what the district was given, because what they were giving was just not enough. And we have kids who are just not learning, but it's like key parts and key points are missing from their education. And so it's definitely a big debate, and a lot of schools are shifting to what the research said. They are shifting to structured literacy, where kids are getting direct phonics instruction, where they are being taught systematically. And hopefully that will continue to all the school systems. But, in the meantime, you still have groups and groups of kids who are being taught how to read the incorrect way. And until basically everyone gets on board with what the research says, and until everyone starts really focusing in on direct and structured instruction, focusing on systematic instruction, things aren't going to change. So I feel like it's going to be an ongoing battle for a long time, for a
All
long
right.
time. Until schools get the right curriculum, until
Yeah.
teachers get trained the correct way, it's going to be an ongoing battle.
Right. That let me ask you a question then. Because you mentioned something about like balanced and structured literacy, and you also mentioned phonological learning. Can you explain what that is? Like break those down a little bit. And then I guess as a parent, what can I do with that so I guess support my children's learning?
Yes. So balanced literacy is one of the most widely used just ways to teach reading. And it's a focus on whole language, where it's a lot of shared reading, guided reading, and using the three cueing systems, where basically students are taught to guess at words, to look at pictures, to guess at the word, looking at the beginning sound. All things that we know, even though they might work for some students, for majority of kids, it's not working. Where structured literacy is a more systematic approach, where kids are learning phonics skills systematically, they're building on one another, they're getting direct instruction. Whereas in balanced literacy, phonics was not always like the focus. So even though some teachers would teach phonics, it would be haphazardly. And
Mm-hmm.
so structured literacy, it's really they're following a system. They are building the skills from one another. And the research has been telling us that this is what kids need to learn how to read.
Mm-hmm.
And phonological awareness is just basically the awareness of how the English language works, being able
Mhm.
to break down the words to syllables, being able to break down words to individual phonemes. And so all of those things are how what kids need to learn how to read. And
Yeah.
so in terms of what parents can do, number one, um, if your child's school is still using a balanced literacy approach, we can talk to their teacher. You can try to convince them, giving them some research and try to convince them to try structured literacy. Um, I did or in Gillingham training, and some school districts may cover that training for teachers. And it really helped me just learn, number one, what even happens when kids learn how to read. I think like so many people don't know this. And so like understanding how kids learn how to read, what happens in the brain when kids learning how to read, and then also just understanding what systematic phonics instruction is. So phonics is basically when um the kids are understanding that the sounds match the letters, right?
Mhm.
So the sounds they've learned, the letter names they've learned, they know that they go together, and when they're put together, they are words, and the words that they see on paper are the words that they are hearing. And so when you don't know that what you're doing is wrong, it's hard to stop doing it. And so I would always advise, like, if you are a parent and you know about structured literacy, you've been learning more about the science of reading, you've been digging into the research, or maybe you've just been seeing what's been floating around social media, send it to your child's teacher. They may be open to hearing it. That's how I started to learn more about the science of reading. I was seeing posts on social media. Then I attended a conference that was being hosted by some different teachers. And from then, I just gained more and more knowledge, and it helped me to shift my perspective and actually start shifting what I was doing in the classroom.
Yeah.
As far as physical awareness, this is a skill that you can practice with your child daily on the go. So phonological awareness has this big umbrella, and it includes being able to rhyme. It includes alliteration. It includes phonemic awareness, which is being able to break down phonemes, right? So being able to identify the beginning sound in a word, the ending sound in a word, the middle sound in a word, being able to manipulate different sounds. So I share on social media, I share on Instagram, just different tips, different challenges that you can do with your child to practice this skill, because this is going to help them become more aware of sounds. It's going to help them as they learn how to read. It's the number one predictor of reading success. And so you can practice phonological awareness in just like 5 minutes a day. Sometimes it won't even take 5 minutes. Like if you're practicing rhyming words, you're telling your child, do these two words rhyme? Or asking your child to come up with a set of rhyming words or come up with an alliteration sentence. Those are really quick activities, but over time can make a huge difference for your child.
Okay. I love that. We kind of do that, but now is like now I guess having a system
Mm-hmm.
makes it make more sense and being able to like be more intentional about doing that with the kids. That makes sense.
Yeah. Dr. Sylvie, thank you so much for being my very first guest on Early Intellect's Empowered Parent Series. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much
Hmm.
for just sharing so openly about your children, about your experiences with the school system. I really enjoyed hearing your perspective and just learning from you. And I'm sure all those who watch this will also be able to learn something from you. So thank you so much. Do
Yeah.
you have any closing
Um,
words for our audience?
yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. This was like a really, really great conversation. Definitely needed. I guess the only thing I would say to parents, honestly, is like quite frankly, you're doing your best. You're doing all that you could do. We are only humans with but so much time, right? Just, make the time as quality as possible. If it's 5 minutes, if it's 50, do what you can do at that time. Like you're doing great. You're doing great. So,
Yeah,
mhm.
keep going.
Yes, keep going. Yes.
Thank you all so much for tuning in to Early Intellect's Empowered Parent Series. I'll see you next time.